Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Sarah Parks, and I'm the program manager for the Missouri Association of Museums and Archives. Joining us today to talk about accessibility is Amy. She's with Missouri State Archives, previously has other experience and certificates in communication technology accessibility. And without further ado, I will let Amy go ahead and take over, as I don't have any knowledge on this at all. So I'm excited to hear what she has to say for us today.
Well, thank you everybody for being here today. I know we're in for a long haul this morning, but I've built in copious breaks. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple things out to you. First off, in the chat, I've got some handouts and I'm sending a link through for those. Now let me go ahead and get the share screen started. If this worked, you guys should now be seeing my screen. Just to make sure, can everybody see the slide that's up?
Yes.
Great. Right now I cannot see the chat with the way the screens are set up, so I apologize in advance if somebody puts a question through. That way it takes me a few minutes to get to it because I have to toggle. So I wanted to start out by letting you guys know a little bit about me so you know my background in regards to this topic. Well, right now I'm a processing archivist at the Missouri State Archives. I do have a information and communication technology accessibility certificate that I did through edX a few years ago. And at that time, Georgia Tech was running this program. They've gone back to it being something that they don't do online anymore. So I got very, very lucky that this was something I was able to do. It was a 6-week course. Some of the materials are still online if you did want to take a look for them. Also, previous to starting the archives, I was the Adult Services Librarian at Wolfner Talking Book and Braille Library for 5.5 years. And I worked with assistive technology on a daily basis, both using it to test things or helping patrons troubleshoot. And before that, I had 3 years of full-time substitute teaching, which a great deal was spent working with special education students. And then during undergrad, I spent 2 years doing tutoring for Southeast Missouri State University's Learning Assistance Program, which was specifically set up to help students with disabilities with a secondary mission of providing assistance to first-generation college students. So I've had well over a decade of varying levels of experience with accessible technology. So I'm hoping to share a bit of what I learned with all of you. And apologies because I managed to just cover up the toggles with the video stuff. I figure out a place to put this where I can see my notes. There we go. Sorry. We're going to begin today by looking at website accessibility. So much of what is incorporated into this is built, the principles that follow are built upon these. So the very first thing we're going to take a look at is POUR, which is something that web accessibility is built on. It stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. To be perceivable, a website must be perceived by those with visual, hearing, touch-based, and other disabilities. This includes providing alt text, alt links, transcripts, audio description, high contrast web pages, ARIA markups, to name a few of what we will be looking at later today. To be operable, all interfaces, forms, and controls and navigation should be easily navigated. As part of that, all content should be accessible from a keyboard. It also includes making sure you've provided time for everybody to read the content. For example, if your web page has a carousel, provide a way to pause it. Other considerations include avoiding seizure-inducing graphics, making sure sites can be navigated with adaptive controllers, and including a skip to content as part of the web page navigation. To be understandable, the language must be kept simple and concise so it's easily understood by users of all backgrounds. For the majority, it's suggested keeping it to a junior high reading level. Also include using alt text for images. In terms of function, keep navigation simple, predictable, and easily apparent. To be robust, the functionality must be adaptable to work on different platforms, such as different internet browsers, and be able to adapt to future needs as technology advances. Also keep in mind that there are some fonts that are easier to read than others, especially sans serif fonts, which are always easier on the eye to read, especially for those with disabilities. So for all disabilities, some that are really good ones to use include Arial, Calibri, Century Gothic, Helvetica, Tahoma, and Verdana, which are all up on the slide. Basically, I have it set up here where the name of the font corresponds to an example of the font. And then there's some out there for specific disabilities, such as APHONT, which was created by the American Printing House for the Blind, is specifically for low vision. Then the Braille Institute created Actison Hyperlegible for the same. Then Comic Sans and Dyslexie are both ones that were designed for dyslexia. The first three are free, but Dyslexie does cost, so fair warning on that. Also important to keep font size in mind. Regular fonts are considered to be 10 to 12 point. Large print are considered 14 to 18 point, which is the ideal range to aim for any type of things you put out there, whether it be web pages or handouts. And then giant print is considered larger than 18 point. And then for PowerPoints, make sure you don't use anything smaller than 24 point. Then I've kind of got an example of the different sizes on screen. I know they may not be 100% exact due to your screen size, but kind of gives the idea of the differences. When you're organizing web pages, you want to make sure you bake accessibility into your website. It's very hard sometimes to put it in after the fact. So keep in mind that content organization must make sense to all users, even those with screen readers. Keep menus at the top, place the most important information at the top of the page, and try not to overnest the menus by keeping them simple. You also want to use headers 1 through 6. These allow screen reader users to jump between headings. So for example, on this one example I have on the slide, it's from our webpage. The header 1 is all about Missouri history. And then there's a whole series of subcategories. So it would be H2s. And the one on screen here is for elected officials. They can actually just hit H on their keyboard and be able to toggle between hearing those and then hit enter for the one they are wanting to hear the options for. You also want to make sure to use skip links, which are hidden menus, which include things like skip to content that allow screen reader users to bypass menus. So these are going to be things that you don't see on screen yourself, but a screen reader user, and I'll talk more about those programs later, they would be able to hear that when they're using the program. Then alt text goes beyond just websites. This is something where you will be kind of naming images as you're going through. So you want to enter the title and description for each image. So in Microsoft Office, you're going to go to Format Pictures, select Size and Properties, and it also works for formatting shape. Google Suite, you're going to right click on the image and select alt text. If you're using WordPress, this can only be done from the media library. You select the graphic you want and click edit at the top of the page. So a few slides earlier, I had a picture of a magnifier over a book. So I use that for an example on this slide. So the title for the image, which will be the first thing somebody using a screen reader hears, is going to be magnified book. Then it will go into description. And I've got that as handheld lighted magnifier over a youth large print book in Comic Sans font. And then alt text extends to social media as well. So you don't want to forget to use it there. If you're using Facebook, what you're going to do is upload your image, select edit, then you have an option for alternative text that you'll click on. You will add the text you want and click save. So you have that edit will show up in the top left corner when you're doing the post. And in this example, I pulled from our death certificates collection is Laura Ingalls Wilder's death certificate. So my alt text is Laura Ingalls Wilder's death certificate from February 10, 1957, showing her death of arterial sclerosis in Mansfield, Missouri. So you kind of want to give an idea of what's there, but obviously on this written document, you can't include everything. Looking at other social media, for Twitter, you're going to add your photo, select add description, which that's my example on screen right here. You're going to type your alt text and then click save. If you're using Instagram, you're going to go to advanced settings, choose the alt text option, type in your alt text and click save there as well. If you're using WordPress, again, you're going to go to that media library. If you haven't already, upload the chosen image. Once the image is in your library, click it and then edit, and then add your alt text in the description and select done. If you use a scheduling program so you can send things out to multiple social media platforms at once, most of them do not support adding the alt text. So what you can do instead is use a description in the text. So for example, I screenshot this during a webinar last week. We've got this one from Missouri Assistive Technology on screen with a photo description that reads, woman with short hair, glasses, and a mask resting on her with a mask resting her lower leg and injured foot on a knee scooter. I know the whole picture is not there, but do you think you all can imagine what the rest of that picture would be from the description? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of meander onwards. LinkedIn also has the ability to do alt text. The option appears on screen after the photo is added. Then looking at some other things that work for both web and in documents. You have alt links, which are how you name your hyperlinks. So if you're using Office, you're going to go to right click, edit hyperlink. You're going to go to add or modify options for text to display. And that's where you're going to put in what you want seen, but then you're also going to add a screen tip. If you've ever hovered over a hyperlink and it has a little text box that pops up, that is what the screen tip is. And it's very useful for people who are using various assistive technologies to have that there. For Google Suite, you will right click on the link and then add or modify the text. In WordPress, it's going to be insert, edit link, and then add link text. And then often the wording to be read will work for the alt link, but you do need to simplify if needed. Never, ever, ever use click here, but something more descriptive, such as the example on screen, which is open minutes, 1963 through the present. You also want to ensure good contrast. The WCAG standards, which are web accessibility guidelines, has 3 different levels to consider. To be in minimum compliance, you need to have a 3:1 contrast, which is considered the A level. The middle level is a 4.5:1, which is a double A level. The highest is a 7:1 contrast or a triple A level. So looking at the examples of this slide template that I had designed back when I was still with Wolfner, we've got 2 different things going on. That white on blue is actually a 17.59:1 contrast ratio, whereas the yellow on the black is a 19:2.55:1 ratio. And the contrast needs to apply to all content with the exception of logos, because those are excluded from WCAG requirements. And you also need to make sure that if there are any images, it must be presented in a particular way to be understood, such as heat maps. Those are probably also ones that you're not going to be able to get the contrast right on. You just have to try to describe them the best you can. And apologies if you can hear that train in the background. On contrast, there's a couple good tools out there to use. WebAIM offers a contrast checker, which is what I used on the last slide. It is free, it is wonderful, and you do have to have the hex codes to use it. So if you need to determine that first, the tool I found works best is imagecolorpicker.com. And that's what I have up on screen right now. You can kind of just see the hex code for that blue at the bottom, and you see the various shades in the palette up above. Then if you want to simulate different vision issues, there is an extension for Chrome called No Coffee Vision Simulator. And it simulates various vision issues such as macular degeneration or glaucoma to ensure that web pages are built to better help those with visual disabilities. On the left, we have what normal vision looks like on a website. And the right is how the same web page would look for somebody with macular degeneration. So you can see they're losing the whole middle part of that screen. So it might be important to keep things on the top or the sides where they're more visible. Then another thing that's important to consider is ARIA, which is Accessible Rich Internet Applications Suite. It does help make content more accessible. And how it does that is by including markups to create hidden menu options for screen reader use, adding special coding to operate forms or read tables, and it can allow screen readers to use JavaScript. And it does need to be built into the web page HTML, usually in the CSS and other types of things like that. So it's most likely to be used by web developers, but it's still important to know this is out there. I know a lot of you might be posting videos on YouTube or social media, so you want to keep in mind that audio descriptions and captions are important. Audio descriptions are aimed at those with vision loss. It adds a sound overlay to describe the visuals, whereas audio captions are for those with hearing loss and adds a text overlay to show what is heard. So I actually have here an example. It's an oldie, but it's still the best short video out there. It's the trailer from Frozen with both descriptions and captions added. So just a moment while I get this up. Right from this one. Sorry, it's not wanting to display right for some reason. I just had to Google it to get this back up. If you can't hear it, let me know, you guys, because it did not give me the option to share the sounds. I'm hoping it works like it's intended.
Yeah, we're not getting the sound, Amy.
Okay, let me see if I can get it figured out. Okay. Should be working now. Let me run it back to the beginning.
From the creators of Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph, Disney.
Is it working now for
A
y'all?
carrot-nosed coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Ooh, hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot. The reindeer falls on his chin. The snowman uses his arm as a crutch. The reindeer paddles his front legs. Head over heels, the snowman crawls along the ice. The reindeer does the breaststroke. The snowman rolls his body, but flips onto his back. The reindeer's tongue sticks to the ice. The snowman held his head. Twig arm and reindeer lips tug at the carrot. The carrot flies off and lands in soft snow. The reindeer goes after it with snowman and his body parts hanging on his tail. The snowman puts himself back together again and glumly contemplates his noseless state. The reindeer jams the carrot back in place and pants like a proud puppy. The snowman pats him with his stick-thin arm, then goes to sneeze. He grabs his nose with both hands. His head shoots off. Frozen, coming this winter in 3D.
Okay, that was that. I hope that seeing that example helps. Next, we're going to kind of look at some of the options for being able to add that description if you need to, using some software. I will also let you know that paid versions of Zoom have the ability to turn on captions that are available during the event recording as well. And you can also include audio descriptions that can be incorporated directly into presentations, or when you're doing a video, you can have two uploads, one with a separate track. When you're adding descriptions, like I mentioned, you want to incorporate things into the script, such as describe the photo, describe the graph or map. Kind of get that critical information that that image is sharing out there so that the user who can't see that can gain the same understanding or close to it as those who can see it. You want to describe the movement that's in a video, especially if it's staged opposed to an academic style presentation. So for example, if a canoe's going downstream or if somebody's dancing or something like that, you want to make sure that somebody that can't see that knows what's going on. As mentioned, you can create a second upload with a specialized audio track in place and name it whatever the presentation name is, audio described, or you can incorporate it directly into the video. For adding captions in Facebook, you're going to go to tap settings on the video, and then you're going to add subtitles and captioning. If you're in YouTube, from the left menu in YouTube Studio, select subtitles and then the video you want to edit. You're going to click add language and then select the language you want and then click add, and it's going to add those subtitles to the video. In Zoom, to get to those settings that I mentioned, you go to navigation, click settings, you go to the meeting tab in the advanced menu and you toggle on the automated captions. If you're offline or using your own server, you can still do this to videos. What you're going to want to do is follow the instructions for YouTube. You're going to export the subtitle file, take both the video file and those captions that are exported for everything, and upload those into a software called DaVinci Resolve. It is free for individual and small scale use for businesses, and you can actually merge everything together into one file. Just so you know, no product is 100% accurate, but you want to be sure to double check the captions before you upload and edit as needed when the software allows. I know when I did this at Wolfner for some videos, probably I'd say there still was always about 10% of stuff I had to update the wording because it didn't get it quite right. YouTube and Resolve allow the editing, but Facebook and Zoom don't. However, you can use Zoom with a manual transcriber for captions, but the process is obviously going to be much slower. Things are not going to be up there immediately. There are websites you can go to that check for accessibility, and those include ACTS, which is put out by accessibility tech giant DeQ. They have a free Chrome extension that you can use. Then WebAIM has Wave, which the basic version is free to use. Then they offer paid options for testing entire websites, which include Wave Runner that starts at $500 for reviewing up to 10,000 web pages, which also will include a detailed report of the errors and a 2 to 3 page analysis of the website. They also have 2 API options for real-time analysis. And then Tenon, which is another one that does assorted pricing plans. My example on screen is one of our web pages that I've put through Wave. You can see the various icons that show where there are issues or things that are positive. And you have the ability to kind of click on those and find out more. So for example, we had 15 alerts, but no errors on this web page. So the alerts mean things kind of work, but they're not perfect. Whereas errors mean they aren't going to work at all. And you can even see where there's some examples of the ARIA markup coding in this as well. So before we go any further, do you guys have any questions? I know that these are grounding principles, so it's a great spot for questions before we move onwards. And looking at chat, is it actually prompting you guys to do a login to get to those handouts? Because it shouldn't be, which means I may have to check something afterwards. Okay, I see at least one person saying they did get in without a login. That's great. That's what should be happening. Do we have any questions about website accessibility?
I have a quick question.
Okay.
My name's Kat. I'm in Kansas City right now. But I loved the Frozen trailer with the audio description. I thought that was fantastic. And I'll look into this later, but I was kind of curious how audio descriptions work in scenes where there's like dialogue. Like how, like I guess how does that balance between, you know, the dialogue and then like, are there like usually enough time, or do you have to kind of like shorten the audio description to get it to like fit around the dialogue, or like am I thinking too hard about this?
You're not thinking too hard. Basically, you kind of have to work with the video or the film. So if there is a lot of dialogue, they're going to try to squeeze things in during pauses, and it may not be as descriptive as what you heard in that Frozen trailer.
Okay.
Like, for example, some things I used to describe things back in the day. Obviously, like most people are familiar with the Sound of Music in the opening scene where Julie Andrews' character is running through the mountains. That obviously you have ample time for description. But once you get to the dialogue, it may just be a quick thing to let you know where somebody's standing, or maybe a prominent action that's going on, because you can't really do the description over the dialogue. It just doesn't work.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Does anybody else have any questions?
Kat, if you're ever interested, sometimes Netflix has that option so you can see kind of what, you know, one of your favorite shows may sound like with that audio description and your captions on too, just to see how that works with dialogue before you test your own videos.
Yeah, and I will let you guys know, Netflix, it's hit or miss on whether it's got the audio descriptions. So if you guys happen to have Disney Plus, you're actually going to have a better time finding something that's been audio described, because almost all of the movies that have been released in the last decade have it as an option. And they've been working on going back on the older films and getting it added as well. So hopefully that kind of helps out too.
Great to know. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions before we take, say, a 5-minute break? Okay, well, let's go ahead and take about 5 minutes so you guys can kind of process, review. If you have any questions before we get started on the next section, we can do that. I just want to make sure that you guys have time to think about everything and have kind of a mental break before we go on to that next part. We'll get started again in about another minute. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the next section. Did anybody come up with any more questions about the web accessibility section before we get started? Okay, let's take a look at our next section, which is document accessibility. The one thing I'm going to highly suggest is to download something called Vision Australia's Document Accessibility Toolbar. This tool is great. It combines a lot of the key things that we use when we're using Word in one place and sets it up in a way that puts wizards there to prompt you for things that are needed you may not know are needed, such as inclusion of alt text or building accessible tables. It does have things such as a Word to HTML tool that removes Microsoft's proprietary code when you wanted to copy something over to a web. It works for all PC versions of Word, including Office 360. So kind of looking at the example of this toolbar, what it will do is it'll add it with all your other menus once it's downloaded. You have your headers 1 through 6, options for building accessible tables, breaks, which we'll talk more about later. On the layout, you've got the ability to insert and set the alt text for your images, building an accessible table, as well as doing your table contents, headers, and footers all accessibly. Ditto with endnotes, footnotes. You still have the ability to adjust your fonts. And then there's various things here for editing and checking. And then we have our little inspect, which is a various tools to help out, which we're going to look at more closely. Inspect includes tools to create, validate, and check for things like contrast. It also has a built-in screen reader that allows the authors to simulate the experience in test documents. So looking counterclockwise from the top left, you have the Microsoft Accessibility Checker, a color contrast checker, the Document Inspector, Word's screen reader demo, copy the HTML, save as HTML, and the user guide. But if you have where you don't have IT that will allow this to get through, all this can also be done manually. It's just that toolbar, putting everything in one place is just wonderful. So if you're having to do things manually, for images, adding that alt text, you're going to insert your image, right click, go to Format Picture, Layout and Properties, then alt text, and from there you'll add your title and description. You want to provide a descriptive yet succinct title, and then use a description to add a bit more information such as color, shapes, names of people, etc. So in this example of a photo I pulled from our Little River Drainage District collection, I've just titled it simply Little River Drainage District Photo. Then the description, I did 6 men sit in a canoe as a 7th stands in the middle of the boat. They are stationary against a bank while looking at the camera. That kind of will give somebody who can't see that the gist of what's going on in that photo. For those hyperlinks, to add the alt links, you're going to go to insert hyperlink, right click to select edit the hyperlink. Then you're going to select edit text to display here at the top, what I have circled. And you're going to go ahead and put that in. You also want to do your screen tip, which will be that little hover box that shows up. So you're going to want to check that next. And it should be something very similar to the displayed text, but shorter. So in this example, the full sentence where this link is being used is to learn more about how to create accessible hyperlinks, visit, and then our text to display is WebAIM's links and hypertext web page. Then I added never ever write, please click here. And the reason I say that again is because whoever's trying to open that link with a screen reader, if it says click here, they don't know what they're clicking on and they're not likely to. Then on your headers, you're going to find those on your home tab under the styles section. Before the first header is added, only header 1 and 2 appears options, but after 2 is added, 3 appears and so forth. The thing to keep in mind is that screen readers can only read headers 1 through 6. So even though Microsoft provides additional options, you do not want to use anything after header 6. As kind of mentioned earlier, headers are navigation points that basically create links that allow users to skip to specific points in the document or the web page by hitting the H key, and it will toggle through all of those. When you're using Word and you want to check for issues in a document, you're going to go to File, Inspect Document, Check for Issues. You're going to go to Check Accessibility. And then after the report runs and appears, you're going to select each identified issue and it will list why it needs to be fixed and how to fix it. This tool only works with the newer DocX files. And to let you know, the same process can be replicated for checking PowerPoint and Excel files in the PPTX and XLSX formats as well. And all the manual methods I've discussed work in PowerPoint as well. Some other tips are to keep in mind for spaces between lines, don't hit enter. Use breaks, and that's because every time you use enter for somebody using a screen reader such as JAWS, which we'll go into more detail about later, it's going to say blank. So if you have 4 enters in a row creating a gap, it's going to go blank, 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 blank. You do want to avoid tables whenever possible, which I know that doesn't always work on finding aids and such, depending on the format. But if you can avoid them, if you have to create them, just use the disability accessibility toolbar, because otherwise it is almost impossible to set up a table correctly using Word. And JAWS may not be able to read the table correctly if it's not formatted properly. And the reason I say that is the headers need to be read with each item. Otherwise, there's no context as one navigates the table. And also the way navigation works with JAWS is it will go completely down one column before moving to the next and go completely down and so forth. It will not read across a table. For lists, you want to make sure if you're using bulleted lists that you definitely use them only with things that have no particular order, because JAWS will read the word bullet before each item. For numbered lists, you definitely want to use those only for ones where there's an actual order to it, such as instructions, because JAWS will read the numbers before the items. So I've got some examples here I'm going to show you guys. First off, we've got here on screen, we will look at this full document in a minute, a finding aid that I did last summer for the Governor's Council on Disability. But before we get to that, I actually have a demo finding aid here. This is just a scaled back version of our own finding aid template. I kind of simplified it. I'm going to kind of show how to get these headers added. So our title is always going to be our header 1. Then all of our subsequent big headers are going to be our 2. So in this case, our department of and our subgroups are going to be headers 2, as is the administrative information, the historical and biographical notes, and the additional descriptive information. Bouncing back to under that historical, the timeline and is another one we have that is fairly important. So I would actually label that as a header 3. And then under the additional descriptive information, I would do the same thing for bibliography, other finding aids, related material, and series. So as you can see in this navigation pane, all of those popped up, although we do apparently have a enter in this gap instead of a break between department and subgroup. So now I'm going to pull up that full finding aid that is completed. And you can see on this particular one, we've got everything is over here in the navigation pane. So those become the headers somebody with a screen reader is using that they can jump between. But they also have a great benefit for us, because let's say I got in another box of minutes and I need to add those. I can click on the container list for minutes and it bounces right to it. So having those headers in there are also a great navigation point just for us to use. I bounce between them all the time when I'm adding things or looking at something while I'm processing. So just to kind of give some other examples here, you can see the bibliography, other finding aids and series headers. You may have to clean up some of the actual formatting in terms of what font or size, bold, italics, and that, because of what the defaults are for the headers to fit a template if you've got specific ways to do it. But that's a lot easier to do than trying to basically do everything from scratch when you have the useful tools. When you're converting from Word to PDF, there are technically 3 different ways you can do that, but only 2 of them are going to keep the coding for the accessibility that I just showed you. The easiest one is the file save as Adobe PDF, since it's right there on the file menu. Or you can go to File, Export, Create Adobe PDF. You never want to do a save as and change the file type, because that's going to maintain the text, but it's going to strip all of the coding. So next, kind of looking at PDF remediation. If the Word document has already been made accessible, there should be very little to do in Adobe Acrobat DC. Everything I'm about to show you works in that program, but Adobe Reader cannot remediate a PDF document since it's designed as a reading tool only. But if you're taking a document that's been scanned or an older PDF that maybe never had the coding, remediation is critical to make it usable for somebody with a disability. So the steps to do that are, first, you want to choose Scan and OCR. Then under Recognize Text, choose In This File and then select a language. So in our example, we're working with something that's in English. Then you want to click on the blue Recognize Text. This will start a process. How long it takes depends on how long the document is. Then your next step you're going to want to do is add the accessibility tool. So on your menu, there's a little thing that looks like a wrench on the lower right-hand corner. You want to scroll down there to protect and standardize. And then under accessibility, which is a little icon that looks like a person in the middle of a purple circle, you click add. And then you now have a new toolbar on both the right and left sides of your screen. The right toolbar gives you all the options under that little purple person icon. And those include things such as auto tag document and form fields, reading options, accessibility check, accessibility report, identify form fields, set alternate text, a setup assistant, and reading order. So we're going to look at those in a little more detail. For auto tag document, you have the option to automatically add tags to document. So you would want to select yes. I will let you know that many older documents may have a few tags that happen to be scattered in there, but they're not going to have everything. Then after the process is done, the left toolbar will show the tags, reports, and other issues related to the process. To view the tags, you would click on the little icon that looks like a tag. And so you can see the document tree tag now that will show you where paragraphs start, where the headers are, section headers, and so forth. Sorry, I just hit a button I shouldn't have. Then for setting the alternative text, kind of same deal as what we've done earlier. You give a description by typing in the box. The actual box itself can be shifted around on screen so that you can move it around as you're trying to type. If you have an image on there that's decorative only, that doesn't add any substance, you can check the decorative figure box instead, and you'll save and close when you're done. So in this example, I borrowed from the Missouri Bicentennial Photo Drive. It's the logo. So I have, and I know not all of it is showing up on screen because of the length, but we have the St. Louis Arch with the Pony Express rider outline on one side and a wedge-shaped B-2 bomber on the right that's visible. I think before that I had mentioned this is logo for the photo drive. On the auto tag form fields, this is for your computer fillable forms. After the process runs, you can go to identify form fields to ensure everything is correct. So in this example from our local records preservation grant, you can see that everything has actually been filled in correctly. So somebody can click on applicant agency and they'll hear that and they'll be able to immediately type once they hear that that's a fillable field. So it's basically the same idea as what the auto tag we looked at, but for the fillable forms. And if you do need to update anything that may have filled incorrectly, you can click on the name of the field in the right sidebar, such as the applicant agency in this example, and then be able to type in that field and update it to whatever you need it to be. For reading options, tagged reading order is best for most things. And I also suggest on the reading mode options, set it to read the entire document, because that's going to give somebody using a screen reader the flexibility to go through it as they please instead of being forced to do it a way that was set up by us. To view the reading order, you click on the little Z-shaped icon. And then you can see here that our headers are number 1, the applicant agency is a number 2, contact information is the number 3, and so forth for that. And you can update this if you need to. What you would do is go to reading order and then create the option. Instead of doing the automatic, you would clear the structure to remove the previous reading order. And then you can also select the show order panel to see the full breakdown. So you can kind of move these around if you need to see the order here, move them around there as you need to, and so forth. When you think you're done and you're wanting to do an accessibility check, the document is tagged. There is a box on this menu that you want to check saying that it is tagged. But if it's not, you want to make sure it's unchecked, and then you're going to click the start checking. The finished report list issues on the, I'm getting tongue tied, sorry. The finished issues list opens in the left toolbar, and you can always return to that at any point after the report's been ran by clicking on the little blue icon that has a person and a check mark. So in this particular document, there are still actually 4 issues that are there. So I could have clicked on one of those and seen more about it. So if I did that, I would see that there is a tag that failed and a title that failed. And then you can click on the little hash that's next to something to open the issues list, which is what I've got for the first one. And then there's a little hamburger menu at the top that will then bring up your ways to fix the fields. So after you've selected that, uncheck the fields needing fixed, then you can type in what you need to, and then click OK. And if the change works, you will get a title passed, or whatever the other issue is passed, showing there. If fix is not an option, the explain will link to the instructions on how to fix it. To see the full report, you go to the button that has the little paper with the blue person next to it, and it will give you the full breakdown. So like in the summary, 2 things need a manual checked, 1 was skipped, 25 passed, 4 failed. And you can see in the more detailed, for example, we had a permission flag that passed, an image only that passed, but a tag that PDF that failed, and a logical reading order that pretty much that's always going to be a manual check. Some other useful icons to note at this point is that there is a view any bookmarks button, which looks like a little bookmark. a view any attachments button, which looks like a paperclip, and a content list. It looks like a typical table of contents. There are other ways to do all of this because there is the setup assistant as well. But if you already followed the steps that I went through before this, you don't need to use this tool because it's a wizard to walk you through all the steps. But I want to make sure you guys have the options to do things both ways. So if you use a setup assistant, you're going to go to step one is set all accessibility options out of the choices that are there. So that way it works with any type of technology somebody is using. And then since that is also the default, you could just use recommended settings and skip setup as well. But if you decide to do everything yourself, follow the next 4 steps after clicking next. The second step is dealing with the contrast. You can change the document color contrast options. However, I don't recommend this because it can interfere with assistive technology where somebody already has their own preferences set up. The next option is reading order, which I do suggest using the infer reading order from the document, because if you've done it right, then it's going to be set up the way it needs to. So you don't want to pick one of the other options. Then for readability, which is the next step, I suggest keeping the for large documents only read the currently visible pages option there, and you can always change that number of minimum pages as well. Then when you get to the autosave option, I suggest disabling the document autosave and instead also doing reopen to the last page viewed. So if somebody closes out a PDF, it goes back to where they left off. They can always navigate back to where they go. So we're at the end of another section. So do we have any questions at this point about Word accessibility or remediating PDFs? Anybody? Okay, let's go ahead and do maybe say this time another 5-minute break sound good, or do you guys want it to be shorter or longer? And to kind of review things and see if you come back with any questions, or if you need to run to the restroom or whatever.
I think 5 sounds fine. Thanks, Amy.
Okay. Well, we will regroup then at 10:03 to look at our next section, which will examine some of the end user experience. Welcome back, everybody. Do we have any more questions about what we've learned so far before we move on to the next section? Okay. I guess we're moving forward. The next thing we're going to look at is public access computers. I'm sure every institution has at least one available for patrons to use, even if it's just for looking up things in a set of documents, using a CD-ROM. I know here we have the microfilm reader scanners that are great, that are connected to computers. This would cover situations like any of those. So the first software I want to bring to your attention is one I mentioned earlier called JAWS. It stands for Job Access with Speech. It is a screen reader software, which is a program that allows the computer to narrate all the relevant information and allow full computer access via keyboard only. JAWS is actually the most popular program of this type, and it is targeted at both those with vision loss and physical disabilities. You do get full navigation via keyboard. It allows for export to a refreshable Braille display. It works with all browsers, but it is also for PC only. So I have another video here that I'm going to get set up. We're actually only going to watch maybe about a minute of this one because it's long and there's only one really good chunk worth showing. So let me get that set up. And of course, it's not working again. I apologize. I'm getting that link pulled. I don't know why it just decided not to work properly today on opening all of those. They were tested yesterday, so I do apologize.
When I was a student, I'd write long essays that I'd work.
Okay. Got it up. We're going to have to deal with an ad first. So I apologize there too. I'll just tell it to play while I'm getting the sound.
But now I'm writing short emails and messages all day, every day.
Then this, I'm going to actually skip a little bit ahead to get to the juicy bit. Sorry, when I pop the screen back up, so I could read the minutes section. We want to jump to this point and watch for about a minute. This is going to demonstrate this blind user using JAWS.
Center. So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or Braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a Braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2. Search for heading level 2. You are here. Heading level 1. Make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of.
Okay. He goes on to do some further demonstrations, but that kind of gives the gist of what JAWS is capable of doing. Another software to be aware of that's out there is called ZoomText. It's what's called a magnifier reader software. It's designed for low vision users and is actually very popular with that category. It can magnify items on screen up to 36 times their original size. It can read the text, but you have an option to disable that. And a lot of users of ZoomText do that because they want to see it. They don't want to hear it, or they would be using JAWS instead. And you have different display choices, such as picking out high contrast themes, ways to make the cursor more noticeable, and ways to make the pointer larger in contrast. So I've got up on screen, this is an example of the ZoomText menu. You can see where you can change colors, information about the pointers and cursors and stuff. You have the tab for the reader where you can toggle things on and off as well. And then down below, I have an example. And I know that top bit's fuzzy, but basically what they're trying to demonstrate is here's what the document looks like normal versus here's when you zoom it. And I borrowed this graphic actually from one of their tutorials. Then there's Fusion, which is actually combines JAWS and ZoomText. It's great because in many settings allows a user to choose which one they want to use, such as at a library, archive, school, etc. It has all the features of both programs, and you can, when you have Fusion, you can use it as Fusion that combines both programs, or just as JAWS, or just as ZoomText. All three programs actually offer a 40-minute demo mode that can be downloaded, and the timer on that 40 minutes will reset each time the computer is restarted. So if it's something that wouldn't be used frequently, that would probably be the more cost-effective way to go, because these programs are up in the 4 figures, so they're pretty pricey. I see that Deborah's asking, would there be a Mac version of JAWS? The answer is no. And that's because Apple has their own built-in program called VoiceOver that's across all of their products, whether you're using a desktop, a laptop, an iPad, iPhone, even an Apple Watch. And we're going to look at that a bit in a minute. There's another program out there called NVDA, Non-Visual Desktop Access. This is a free and open source screen reader user for people with vision loss and physical disabilities. It allows you to fully navigate most programs via keyboard. I say most because it works with everything in Microsoft, but other programs may request the additional Java Access Bridge package in order to use those programs. It also allows for Braille output like JAWS did, and it works with popular browsers. And again, this is a PC only product. Windows also has a set of built-in tools. And I'm going to kind of go through all of these, but I'm going to let you know from my experience, Patrons are always going to want JAWS or NVDA first, and they're only going to use the built-in Windows tools if they're desperate, because they're not near as intuitive and they're not nearly as well developed. But they are there as something that can be used if nothing else is affordable. I can also tell you from my own personal experience testing things using this versus JAWS. JAWS makes it easy. I have cursed my way through using the ease of access tools on Windows because they are, like I said, they are not nearly as intuitive. So just something to keep in mind, but they're free. They're going to be the easiest thing that you can get a hold of in a split second. All of the images that I have here are from Windows 10, but let's face it, we know Windows 11 is out there. I have it on my personal laptop. It has all of these same options. It's just the menu is going to look a little different. So the way they all work, exactly the same. The way you see that menu on the left side, going to look a little different, but it's still easy enough to go between one or the other. So this first tool under ease of access and settings is change text size. So you can change the size of apps and text on the main display. It always defaults to 100%. Actually, personally, I actually have mine set at 125 just because I find it a little easier to view and less eye strain, which is something that will probably help out in the long term. So something to kind of keep in mind there. You can also toggle things such as brightness, the way it handles animations, transparency, scroll bars, and so forth from this option. And you can adjust that size of the apps and text in 25% increments. The next thing is you have the ability to change the cursor size and color. So you can first change the thickness up here, colors for everything, and size are down here. There's also a built-in magnifier which works similar to Zoom text, and this can be increased to be up to 1,600% of the original size. So that can be changed through here. You can customize the increments to be from anywhere from 5 to 400%. You can set the magnifier to turn on each time a computer is started or trigger it later. And you can also have the magnifier follow the mouse cursor, keyboard focus, text insertion point, or the narrator's cursor. So these are all options that are there in the menu for that. You can also change the color filters, which can help with the various types of color blindness. So the example here has got what it would be for the blue yellow, but red and green is actually the most common, which is what I probably should have checked was one of those options to demo. Then you have different high contrast themes, 4 different ones a user can select from. So this example shows for high contrast white. Then you have high contrast black, high contrast 1, and high contrast 2. Different people, depending on their issues, are going to find different ones of these more useful than another. So having that there is great. Okay, we've got a question here from Erica, so I'm going to stop and answer that. She asks, is there a minimum font size? I'm partial to 11 point Times New Roman, but I know most people prefer a 12. 11 should still be okay. I would actually say if you're aiming to target all users, you're going to want to have minimum 12 point font. And a sans serif like the Arial or the Calibri is actually going to be the better option for people with disabilities. That said, do I still personally like Times New Roman the best? I will not deny it myself. So I hope that answers your question, Erica. Okay. Then there is a built-in tool that's equivalent to JAWS in Microsoft. It's called Narrator. This would be the one that I mentioned before is not very easy to use. It can be turned on using a shortcut key as needed or set to open at the time somebody signs into a computer. There are 5 voices to choose from. And you can also adjust things like the speed and the pitch of the voice, and the volume can also be adjusted. There is a Braille output option in this setting if you add in additional software that's linked to in the setting. And then lastly, there are some hearing options that are set up. So you have the option to change both the hearing and input volumes, use mono audio, which can channel all the audio into one ear, which might be great for somebody with something like a cochlear implant, and also turn on visual alerts so things flash up on screen instead of just coming through sound. You can also adjust the caption settings for the device, which will work on any video played through a player on the device, such as media player, something through the iTunes software like that. It won't really affect what's on the websites. Then there is also something called interaction. So from here, you can actually click on the speech and be able to access things such as Cortana to do a voice search, dictate, which is kind of your equivalent of Dragon, where you can talk and it will type what you're saying on screen. Then you have a keyboard option, which brings up a on-screen keyboard, and you can also set up what are called sticky keys that allow the control and shift to remain active even when the key is not pressed, toggle keys, which are set up to make a sound when they are pressed, and filter keys, which tells your computer to ignore a brief or repeated key presses and allows you to set a time as key is pressed before it repeats. A lot of those are set up more for people with physical disabilities, but they are still great tools to have there. Then for mouse, you have the option to use the numeric keypad on the keyboard to move the mouse pointer instead of using a mouse. And then you have eye control, which is, at least for Windows 10, is still considered beta. I think it's standard by the time you get to 11, but it requires a connected device that a user would wear that can track their eye movements and be able to select things on screen based on that. The next, we're going to jump into smart device accessibility, which we're going to look at Apple device accessibility first. Like I hinted at an answer to this question, this, even though I'm picturing an iPhone here, this works on every Apple product. So your equivalent of JAWS is going to be VoiceOver. It will narrate your content on the screen, and it can connect to a refreshable Braille display. And then you have a tool called the Rotor, which only works when VoiceOver is turned on. You actually make a twisting motion with your fingers, kind of like this, and it rotates through different options and allows you to adjust settings such as volume, speech rate, reading of punctuation, and more. And reading of punctuation be like actually voicing comma, period, etc. And then you have Zoom, which is kind of their equivalent of the Zoom text that magnifies the screen. You can go up to 15 times the size, and you can have it either be full screen or a little window that trails your finger across the screen. And all these accessibility settings can be located by going to settings and then accessibility to turn them on. In addition to these, some other things Apple devices can do is you can adjust the size of the display. So everything can be bigger. You can make just the text size bigger. You can increase the contrast, invert the colors. You can actually set up for all of your text to be bold. And then coming in iOS 16, which hopefully comes out next month, you have something called Doorway Detect, which will help users navigate the last few feet through a doorway, which can sometimes be tricky, especially if they're using a cane. They may not know 100% where that doorway is placed and could end up bumping into a door jamb or something instead. So this should help alleviate some bumps and bruises for those users. Looking at Android devices, you have things built in there too. Their program is called TalkBack, and it actually incorporates the equivalence of both JAWS and Zoom text. So you have Voice Assistant, which lets you hear items tapped or tap an item to perform a task. You have Screen Zoom and Font, which lets you adjust the size of icons in the font, whereas the magnifier window lets you move a magnifier window around the screen. You can also invert colors if needed. And then for Android 11 and newer, you have live transcribe, which can show text on screen as the words are spoken. Look out, which is where you can put a camera to an object and have it identified. And there's actually now an on-screen Braille keyboard, so somebody doesn't even need to have a refreshable Braille display to connect. But speaking of a refreshable Braille display, what those are little tools that have raised dots, so a user can have Braille displayed on there, read it, and then go on to the next set of characters. The most common of these devices in my experience is the Focus 40 Blue, which is produced by Freedom Scientific, the same people who created JAWS and Zoom Text. And this is also the most popular one given out by the state to people that qualify to get one. And I do have a demo video here. I'm just going to pull the link from elsewhere since clicking's not working, but a refreshable Braille display will work with all smart devices or computers. Give me just a minute to get that link. Okay, and we're gonna look at this video. I will get it set up to where I want it to start as soon as it gets past. Okay, we're good. So let me fast forward it to about 30 seconds. And we're gonna see how refreshable Braille display
Going to
works.
introduce us to a bit of kit. Alice, what have you got?
So I've got here a refreshable Braille display. So this is a device that lets you read and write Braille electronically. So you can connect it to a device like a computer, a smartphone, even the Apple Watch supports this now. And providing you've got the relevant screen reader enabled, so JAWS, voice over talkback, you can control and access your device using Braille. Because traditionally when you use a screen reader, you listen to things, you listen to the speech, you listen to the audio, whereas this essentially lets you read instead. So you can be a lot more independent. I find that anyway, and it's just a different way of working.
So just to be clear, this lets you read and write all on the same device. That's our video, that's a quick video. So if you like the video and it found...
Okay, so that's kind of the end of the juicy part of that video. The device they were displaying in the video was actually a HumanWare refreshable Braille display, which I've actually used one of those before. So they are pretty nifty. Both of those devices, both pictured and in the video, also have a Braille keyboard, which are what those two sets of 4 little buttons are. They correspond to what would be the same thing on a Braille writer. So if somebody learned how to use a Braille writer, which embosses the paper back in the day, they can do the same thing when they have a refreshable Braille display. But you can get refreshable Braille displays that only read or ones that you can read and type. Some other tools to keep in mind are switches, which can allow someone with limited hand use the ability to select what they need on screen just by touching the button. And for typing, they can use it to do a on-screen keyboard. Then you also have adaptive mice, which can be used for those with movement issues. There are also things out there such as breast switches, eye tracking devices are designed to be used by quadriplegics and others with severe physical disabilities to control computers. And just to give an example here as well, the adaptive mice started with assistive technology, but they are something now that are very handy for all of us. I use one myself to kind of help with tendonitis, but a lot of us here have things like that, or maybe a keyboard that's designed to help with carpal tunnel, things like that all got their start in assistive technology before going more mainstream. This next slide is actually available to you as a handout, so I just want to let you know it's there and it breaks down what the different options are with the different types of devices. There is also a free Microsoft app for Apple products I highly suggest. It's called Scene AI, and it can narrate things in the world around the user. It is available in 8 languages, including English and Spanish. Some of the highlights on how it can help in an archive setting include the option for short text, which can immediately read a document. It has an option called Documents that can capture a printed page and then read the text aloud. It also makes it visible in adjustable large print. So that's what this example here is. So you can see you can make the font bigger or smaller as needed. You can even reverse it by clicking this little black box to have it be white on black. Then there is Person, which is a way to recognize people around you. It can even detect certain emotions, and you can program it to detect specific individuals. And it can also roughly detect the distance between people. There is a handwriting reader, but I've tested this before. And even again, as I was doing this presentation, it's not going to be 100% accurate. It's trained to look at modern cursive, so it's not really going to help out on the older style you see on documents from the early 1900s and before. So just fair warning there. And then you also have Scenes, which describes the environment around you. Some other options that are there as well include the ability to detect color, lighting levels, and scan and read product barcodes. So do we have any questions about the computer or smart device accessibility? Well, I'm not seeing anything, so if something pops up, I'll address it. If not, let's take another quick 5-minute break to digest everything we just learned. And then we will get into the final part of our presentation. And if we get done early, we get done early. It's more important that if you guys have any questions, you let me know and we can get everything ironed out, because my goal here is to be a resource to all of you. So let's go ahead and actually, given the time, let's just say we're taking a 6-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10:35. It's 10:35, so we'll get back to the presentation. Did anybody come up with any questions while we were on break?
Amy, I had one question.
Okay.
For the devices, do people who are used to or prefer using devices, not necessarily like the mouse, but some of the other readers and things like that, do they usually like travel with their own that could be plugged in as long as you have the machine set up to use it? Or is the expectation that you'd have to have like the variety of them available?
I think that's going to depend on the person. Desktops are much more common for people that use assistive technology than laptops are. So I would say it's actually going to be more likely they're going to want you to have the products. But you still have people that they will have a laptop that they could bring. And it's just a matter of if you can configure it to work with something like the microfilm reader scanner. Because I don't know how IT would feel about that.
I was thinking a little bit more like the Braille readers or things like that you would just plug into a desktop, not.
You would still have to have software downloaded
Yeah.
to allow it to work with the desktop. So I would basically say if you could get that program that's in the Windows accessibility, that's the Braille download program added to the computers, that should cover being able to hook up most refreshable Braille displays while still keeping it to stuff that's Microsoft that would get by IT. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody besides Christina have any questions? Okay. For our next section, we're going to take a look at strategies for selecting accessible programs. So the first thing when you're looking at a resource that you're considering is to check that website or resource out for yourself. You want to look for an accessibility web page. It's often found on the bottom menu. And this page will often include information about navigating with a screen reader, a point of contact for accessibility issues, their latest accessibility report if it's available, and usually a Section 508 or an ADA disclaimer. Both of those are laws that deal with assistive technology. And of course, ADA covers much more than 508 does. If you don't see a web page obvious somewhere, search for it under the help or the FAQs. For example, I have a screen clip from OCLC on their accessibility statement pulled up. As you can see, not everything I mentioned is present, but if you look further on their webpage, it points to links to learn more about incorporating accessibility at the local level, since it's something where you can kind of adjust the build. You could also have some highly visible built-in accessibility tools, including contrast options or options to increase or decrease the font size, which is what you have in the circled area over here. This website I'm demoing is WILS. It is one of the state's independent learning resource centers. Their webpage has actually won numerous awards in the past for accessibility, so it's a great example of how to incorporate the most accessibility into a web page. I know we're only seeing a small chunk here with those options, but if you were to listen to this in JAWS, it's even more amazing. When you're selecting an e-resource platform, I have some tips here. You want to start your accessibility conversation with the vendors early, right at the start of investigating a new product. Include stating your institution's accessibility goals and what level of the WCAG accessibility standards you hope to meet. Keep bringing the accessibility up in the conversation so that they see your strong commitment. You want to review all products for accessibility in-house before procuring or renewing a product. This way, you know what challenges need to be addressed. Hand in hand with this is going beyond the VPAT, which is called the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Often organizations may not go into the depth we want on a product accessibility. or make products seem more accessible than they are on those VPATs. Dig deeper and test the things that are mentioned on the VPAT and see if the products match the presented expectations. Then go even deeper still and see what needs to be made more accessible and that isn't mentioned. As you work with the vendors, both during the selection and use of a product, report any accessibility issues found immediately and describe the issue's impact on your users. Offer to demonstrate if needed and keep following up until a solution is found. So I actually have here on screen an example of a VPAT for the end user content on Content DM, which OCLC kindly sent me. I'm going to try to bring up the whole thing. So here's hoping this works. Okay, it pulled it up, but it immediately disappeared. Oh, well, let's pull it up from the PDF link I've got. Okay. So this is what a VPAT's going to look like. You'll have some introductory things. So you see on this particular one, it's product version spring 2020, completion date of May 13, 2020. And I've requested this back in June of 2022, and this was the most recent one they had to send me. You have contact information there. It breaks down table of contents on what they're doing here. So you've got some user impact, definitions, how things were evaluated. So it says here that products may be tested using something called Site Improve. Might use VoiceOver and JAWS. Some of the tools they use include Wave and VoiceOver, WebAIM's contrast checker that I brought up earlier. Then it's giving some notes, kind of some summaries of conformance. And then you get into the actual report, which is going to first give you the criteria, the level of compliance that it meets according to WCAG standards, what the conformance is. Here we have a lot of not applicables. And then under remarks and explanations, it gives a little more information. So for non-text content, that first row, you're finding that the ARIA labeling could be more specific and the alt text does not always describe the image. Up there just names the collection, for example. And then it just kind of continues breaking it down from there. This is 18 pages in total. And then I do see we have a question on text. So let me go ahead and address that. Asked, does Wolfner offer grants to small libraries or institutions to purchase JAWS who may not be able to otherwise afford it? So to start out, of course, Wolfner would be the Talking Book and Braille library. And Wolfner itself does not, but the Missouri State Library has the technology mini grants that you could apply for to get a product like JAWS. But it would be through the state library, not Wolfner. So I hope that answers that question. So here's some more information on the VPATs that I mentioned. They are good if they are produced by an accessibility specialist and if they clearly state the scope of the report and the testing methods and tools. They need to be thorough and concise explanations that reflect real components. They need to honestly disclose defects and be publicly available online. So kind of expand to this, an accessibility specialist can be somebody trained in accessibility or a regular user of assistive technology. And in fact, when you're testing things, having a mix of professional users and differently abled users tends to be best because each group will catch different things. When I was with Wolfner, I sat down with the only blind staff member numerous times so we could work things out together. Because there would be things I would see that are affecting things that wouldn't come up when he was listening on JAWS, tips he knew with JAWS that I learned from to do things better and so forth. So that kind of gives a bit of an example there. And I also want to note that I had to actually email Content DM to ask for the VPAT. They did not have it posted on their site. So that is something that can be a bit of a red flag when you actually have to ask for it. So kind of hand in hand with that, VPACs may be suspect if the template has mismatched formatting, if it hasn't been updated within the last year. Case in point, that one from Content DM was over 2 years old at the time I received it. So that makes it suspect. If everything is marked as supported, don't believe a word that VPAT says. 100% conformance is entirely unlikely. There will always be some glitch somewhere. If there's no useful detail in the remarks and explanation columns, that's another red flag, as is missing content in the cells. Non-applicable conformance levels also seem suspicious because you think they would try to do stuff to fix those categories instead of just saying they're not applicable, because they probably actually are. And then if the evaluation methods list only automated testing or no testing, that's another really big red flag. When you're working with the vendors, start with some basic questions. These include, is this resource screen reader accessible? Can the resource be accessed entirely via keyboard? Are videos captioned and audio described? Have the pages been formatted to include headers 1 through 6? And has ARIA been used within the HTML? If the vendor can't answer these questions, they may have not considered accessibility when the product was created. Often outside the disabled community, accessible means it's posted online for everybody to see and use, which is a completely different definition, instead of that of being accessible to differently abled populations so that they are able to use those. Then just a side note, here on screen, I have an example of a large print high contrast keyboard. If the vendor has passed basic questions, move on to more advanced ones, such as how do you test for accessibility? At what stage do you test for accessibility? Do you have accessibility experts on your team? If not, do you hire an outside consultant? And then ask, do real end users with disabilities help design your products? And if so, how? Keep in mind, it's best that testing begins early in the process and that real end users are involved throughout. Having an accessibility expert on staff is also very useful. And on these more advanced questions, I will admit I borrowed and simplified them from a list Indiana University has that goes into a lot more depth, and that link is available. Some more questions to go beyond the basics include, can you share your latest accessibility report with us? Are the supported accessibility features in your product listed and explained? Does your support staff get trained on accessibility? And where do your designers and developers get accessibility training? Keep in mind, it's best if the vendor staff receives basic accessibility training and that VPATs are available and that the accessibility features are fully explained. Because I can tell you right now, it is extremely frustrating down the line if a differently abled user has to call support on something and nobody on the other end knows what they're talking about. It just does not go over well. I've been on three-way calls before in those situations, and there are times that that former patron and I both knew more than the tech support did. And that is just not a good situation to be in. Looking at digital collection programs from the admin side of thing that we would be using, something to keep in mind is that all of the major programs that a lot of archives and museums use do not have full accessibility. So the VPAT that we looked at earlier shows that Content DM is more accessible on the admin end than on the public side, but neither is fully accessible. I don't have an admin account where I could have tested anything, but on the end user side, I can let you know that if content was OCR'd, Wolfner users were able to use a lot of the collections that are up on Missouri Digital Heritage. On Archive It, the parent company Internet Archive has been working towards accessibility across all of their products. The current user interface has undergone some accessibility testing and they see the need for improvement. Basic navigation is currently possible. All of that said, for somebody who's differently abled, unless a product is considered fully accessible to disabled populations, they don't really consider it accessible. And if it's not fully accessible, they tend to not use that product. Then looking at some of the other programs, when I searched Archive Space, Past Perfect, and Preservica's websites, there was not a single mention of accessibility. There was not a point of contact for accessibility. So at this point, I would say they aren't even keeping that in mind. Then Kia is going to depend on your local build. And the reason I say that is the classic version has addressed complaints about contrast, which is one of the examples I have here up on screen. But since it's open source and users can customize it, it's really up to the users of a local build to decide how they want to incorporate the different things to make it accessible. And I have some other accessibility considerations to keep in mind that go beyond the computer-based technology. So on your building, you want to make sure it's accessible. Signage should be in large print and include the Braille. You want to make sure there's some wheelchair height counters or tables available for use. And then aisles and restrooms should be wheelchair accessible. I know in most museums and archives, aisles really aren't going to be a big deal, except maybe in a reading room, but it's still something to keep in mind. Have a ramp into the building and then the sidewalk cutouts, because those definitely help those who are using the various things like wheelchairs, walkers, and canes navigate. Make sure you have handicap parking spaces available, and remember that service animals cannot be denied entry. And on this point, I will let you know, you do have people out there that will have a pet that's not a service animal and try to pass them off as a service animal, but you can tell the difference between them because of their demur. A service animal will always be calm and helpful to their handler. If they are not trained, they tend to get excited, want to meet other people, things like that. Because I mean, even when I was at Wolfner, somebody tried to sneak in a regular pet as a service animal, and let's just say that pet was not well behaved at all. And I'll leave it at that. There are exceptions for historic buildings. And one of the kind of quick tip sheets to go to on that is one the National Park Service has that kind of addresses different things in regards to what can be done. Like sometimes you might have a historic building, you can't modify it to meet ADA law. But if you build an addition onto the building, then it will have to conform, and other little tidbits like that. And of course, all this is coming from the ADA laws. So want to stress that. Some other things is to remember, discrimination based on disability is not allowed. And keep in mind, not every disability is going to be visible. You could have somebody who's low vision, they don't use a service animal, they don't use a cane, but they still have enough of a issue to be considered legally blind. Or you could have somebody that has a physical disability that's invisible, such as severe food allergies. So just kind of things to keep in mind there. You also want to aim when you do programming to keep it accessible. So describe the visuals during the presentations. Consider showing movies with the audio descriptions and or the captions on. And also, it's always good to keep the name of a local American Sign Language translator handy in case you need to bring them in on request for a presentation. So in this photo, which I borrowed from Flickr, you have somebody who's doing sign language while another individual who's kind of cut off in the background is presenting. Popular accessible browsers is another thing to keep in mind. WebAIM conducted a survey in October of 2017, and this hasn't been redone since that focus on screen reader users. A whopping 41% used Firefox. The next biggest category was 23.3% for Internet Explorer 11, which, while it's no longer being supported, still is something a lot of people who are JAWS users prefer, because when JAWS was created, they actually built it on Internet Explorer. So that's a little sticky wicket there. 15.5% have preferred Chrome, 10.5% Safari, 0.5% Microsoft Edge, and then other would be mostly older versions of Internet Explorer for that 9.2%. The survey may be skewed highly to Microsoft users, as only 172 were Apple desktop users in the survey, and they surveyed over 1,800 people. Of those 1,800, 75% reported as blind and 59% self-reported it as advanced screen reader users. And so, you know, Firefox is very, very popular for people that have disabilities because they have built-in tools. There's a contrast option, built-in zoom, built-in keyboard-only navigation, and even an optional screen reader add-on. In addition to those settings, users can also set up overrides on page fonts and colors, and it can auto-detect if a computer-based high contrast theme is being used and automatically adapt. Chrome has some extensions that can do some of those actions and the ability to zoom the content. Now we're going to take a look at what some other state organizations do offer. The biggest one for assistive technology is going to be Missouri Assistive Technology. They are the statewide office that provides assistive technology devices and support to Missourians that qualify. So they have numerous programs for low or no cost devices. The most popular is called the TAP program, Telecommunication Access Program. And that allows somebody who qualifies to obtain a free iPhone, iPad, or a big button or captioned landline phone, or another assistive telecommunication device free of charge, provided that they can pay for the accompanying service from providers such as AT&T or Charter Communications. They also offer assistive trainings and demonstrations, including a bunch of online tutorials. They have a monthly webinar series as well that looks at different assistive technology tools and devices. I still attend those every month. Once a year, usually in late March or early April, they have the Power Up Assistive Technology Conference. It's highly attended from people throughout the state, both that work with assistive technology as a job and those who use it on a daily basis because of their disability. It's a great way to see some demonstrations, learn firsthand about a lot of stuff. And Missouri Assistive Technology has their webpage at at.mo.gov. And they're also on Facebook and Twitter as well. In fact, it was one of their Facebook posts I borrowed from one of the examples earlier. Some other organizations that are out there include the Governor's Council on Disability. They do offer training and informational brochures, and they will partner with different organizations to help them work on being more accessible. Rehabilitation Services for the Blind mostly works with individuals who are disabled, but they do offer some trainings that they will go into different organizations and teach about disabilities, about assistive technologies and things like that. And then of course, Wolfner Talking Book and Braille Library is a library for people with disabilities that can't use regular books. They offer audio, Braille, and large print books and magazines via mail or download through the BARD system. So those are the other things we have in the state. Of course, I hinted at with the Wills website example. There are also independent living resource centers throughout the state. They're all connected with Missouri Assistive Technology. They also all have people there that can do trainings with individuals or organizations as well. And there are local organizations that can be helpful as well. Like in St. Louis, you have the St. Louis Society for the Blind that's been known to offer trainings. In Kansas City, Drats, I've already forgot the name of their organization out there, but there is one there too. So the bigger cities also offer some other options. So some final notes here. If you guys think of any additional questions after we end today, I can be reached on my email, which is amy.nickless, Nickles, @sos.mo.gov, or you can give me a call on my direct line, 573-751-4303. So what other questions do you guys have, either about what we covered today, or if you have another question about disabilities, assistive technology, or even ADA? Well, while waiting to see if anybody's got any questions, let me just show you a couple other things I brought with me. On a daily basis, we do a lot of removing staples while we process. So something you might not think of as an assistive technology device. The staple removers that were created in-house that take a regular staple remover, puts foam that's gripped with tape, something with this type of handle, and it could be a spoon, a pair of scissors, whatever, because there are things out there on the market with these types of handles for assistive technology, are great for people that have issues with grip. For us, it's just a comfort factor, but that's something that would be considered an assistive technology that's very low tech. Another thing you may not think of, and I brought this with me from my desk, I'm in a borrowed office, but my phone stand that I've got my iPhone here on, if somebody has issues holding their phone, it may not be able to do this. Sometimes having a stand of some kind, either on a table or connected to a wheelchair or something, can enable them to be able to use the voiceover with their phone and not have to hold it. So there's a lot of things out there that aren't even high tech that are beneficial, and some are things we ourselves use and may not realize that their origins were with assistive technology instead. So any questions? Anything else you'd like to know? Something you want me to recap? Or are you guys ready to sign off for the day?
Thanks, Amy. I just wanted to point out, I always think it's funny that a lot of people don't realize that texting was one of those adaptive technologies at first for the deaf community. And everybody uses it all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, even the first touch screens were aimed more at people with disabilities, and then they rolled out to benefit the rest of us, and it's our norm now. Well, everybody, I appreciate you guys joining in, and you're most welcome for all the information. If you need to get in touch with me for more questions later, feel free. I'll go ahead and hang on a few more minutes until they want to kick me off in case you guys come up with anything else.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll leave the call open for a few more minutes. I'll go ahead and stop recording, but the recording will be available on the MAMA YouTube later, probably later this week. And then eventually, if you did have your email signed up for the webinar today, I'll email it out to you directly as well. But you all should receive that shortly.